Picture this. You are standing on the razor-thin edge of two colliding eras.
Right.
On one side, we are accelerating at just breakneck speed toward artificial superintelligence, which is, an entity that will fundamentally alter what it means to be human.
Yeah, completely rewrite the rules.
Exactly. And on the other side, we are staring down the barrel of converging environmental and systemic catastrophes.
Yeah.
And right in the middle, well, there's you.
Just trying to make sense of it all.
Right. You're trying to figure it out in a world where information is moving way too fast, it's overwhelmingly noisy, and the sheer volume of data is just, it's too vast to simply find the truth anymore. How do you actually navigate that without freezing up?
Oh, it really is the ultimate modern paradox. I mean, you and I and everyone listening, we have access to more data than literally any generation in human history, but
we've never felt less certain about what's actually real.
Exactly. Or what we should even do next.
Which is the exact mission for today's deep dive. We are tailoring this specifically for you, the curious learner who wants to grasp the absolute cutting edge of systems thinking, but without getting buried under a mountain of academic jargon.
Which there is a lot of in this field.
Oh, tons. But we're exploring a truly radical framework today. It's called the Bridge 360 Metatheory model. It's authored by Jericho M. Davila, and here is what makes this utterly fascinating. It was actually created in dialogical collaboration with 5 different large language models.
Yeah, which is just a brilliant approach for the era we're entering. To build this framework, Davila effectively used AI models, so like ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, as active interlocutors.
Like debate partner.
Pretty much. He used them as adversarial critics to really stress test the philosophy. So we are pulling from a massive, comprehensive monograph titled ASI Engagement, Scientific Foundation of Hope, along with its sequels and the latest updates up to version 20.6 of the Generalized Governance Algorithm.
It's a huge body of work. And the core shift we are unpacking today is massive, and honestly, it's a little jarring at first. Bridge 360 argues that if we want to survive the 21st century, we actually have to abandon our obsession with finding absolute truth.
Yeah, completely pivot away from it.
Right, and instead we must pivot to managing entropy.
Which is an incredibly heavy lift for the human mind, right? Because truth-seeking has been our primary cognitive tool since antiquity. I mean, it's literally how we built civilization.
Yeah, it's basically our default setting.
Exactly. But Bridge 360 maps out this really compelling structural case for why this old tool is fundamentally breaking down when we apply it to modern, complex systems.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I have to be honest, telling people to just abandon the concept of truth sounds incredibly dangerous.
It does. It sounds like giving up.
Right, or giving in to extreme relativism where just nothing matters. Why on earth would we discard our best tool?
Well, because of a concept called computational intractability. In our modern hyper-complex systems, so think of global supply chains or climate models or algorithmic financial markets, an exhaustive search for the 100% accurate, objective truth is just impossible in real time.
Because there's too much data.
Exactly. By the time you actually crunch all the numbers and compute the perfect, truthful answer to save a failing system, the system has already collapsed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you are waiting for your mental map to perfectly correspond to reality, you simply run out of time.
So we literally cannot calculate the truth fast enough to survive.
Precisely. So Bridge 360 proposes shifting our entire perspective to a truth-neutral, unified probability space.
Okay, truth neutral.
Right. In this space, you don't categorize things as true or false. Instead, everything, physical systems, informational systems, social institutions, it all exists on a normalized entropy interval between 0 and 1.
And this scale is basically a measure of disorder, right?
Exactly. 0 is perfect, rigid order. Imagine a solid crystal where not a single atom can move. And then 1 is maximum disorder, just total chaos, like a gas where molecules are bouncing everywhere randomly. And neither extreme is survivable for a complex system like a society or an ecosystem.
Which brings us to the navigable corridor.
Okay.
Bridge 360 points out that to survive, we need to stay within what it calls the epsilon spine.
The epsilon spine.
Right, which is this highly specific governance corridor right in the middle, between 0.45 and 0.65 on that entropy scale.
So the mechanism here is crucial. Because if a system, say a massive corporate bureaucracy, if it drops below 0.45 entropy, it becomes entirely too rigid. It suffers from what the framework calls structural inbreeding.
Meaning it just refuses to adapt.
Exactly. It becomes brittle, and the slightest market shock will just shatter it completely.
But then if that same system creeps above 0.65, it blows out into ungovernable chaos. No one knows what the rules are, everything is fragmented, and the system dissolves.
Right. And this brings us to Axiom 19 of the framework, which acts as an admissibility filter. Under Bridge 360, when we evaluate a new theory or an economic plan or a political policy, we don't ask, is this perfectly true?
We ask something else entirely.
Right. We ask, does implementing this keep our system within the 0.45 to 0.65 entropy budget? Does it cap how fragile we become?
See, I really struggled with this initially. Discarding truth just feels fundamentally wrong to me. But there's a specific analogy in de Villa's work that made the actual mechanism instantly click for me.
The cave diver.
Yes. Imagine a diver who gets trapped in a murky, pitch-black underwater cave system. Now, if that diver stops and tries to construct a perfectly accurate, scientifically truthful mental map of the entire cave before moving...
They're going to run out of air and drown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the diver who simply follows the entropy gradient, knowing the simple heuristic that air bubbles always rise to the surface, the diver survives. They don't possess the whole truth of the cave, but they have enough navigability to stay alive and reach the surface.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. What is fascinating here is that truth isn't being destroyed by this model. It is simply being demoted.
Demoted, right.
It goes from being the ultimate master paradigm of the universe to just a local tool. A tool we use only when we have the luxury of time, stability, and computation. The danger we face today lies in what the model calls Potemkin attractors.
Potemkin attractors like the fake villages, meant to look impressive from a distance.
Exactly. These are ideas or models that look beautifully stable and mathematically true on paper, but to work, they rely on these unbounded, fragile assumptions that just don't exist in reality.
Right, so if you try to use them...
If you implement a Potemkin attractor in the real world, it inevitably leads to a systemic blowout because it ignores the actual entropy limits of the environment.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
If we are operating in this new paradigm, and we are no longer judging ideas by whether they are perfectly true or false, how do we explain why certain ideas spread like wildfire across the globe, even the genuinely terrible ones?
This is where Bridge 360 introduces a brilliant mechanism. Rule of inference memetics, or RIM.
REM.
Right. This framework proposes that logical rules and patterns of reasoning, the ways we connect A to B, are not just abstract thoughts. They are actual, physical, replicable memes.
Physical memes.
Yeah, and just like biological genes fighting for survival in a jungle, these memes are subject to intense evolutionary pressure.
And their survival has absolutely nothing to do with whether they are logically valid or truthful. They spread because they possess high memetic fitness.
Exactly. An idea might spread rapidly simply because it is highly emotionally resonant, which forces people to share it, or it spreads because it is computationally cheap.
Meaning it requires very little brain power for you to process and accept.
Right. Or it spreads because your specific social group rewards you with status for repeating it.
And Bridge 360 makes a remarkably bold physical claim here regarding artificial intelligence. It argues that the transformer weight matrices inside large language models, the actual billions of parameters that make up the AI, are the very first genuine physical substrate for these memes.
This is a profound shift in how we view AI. When an LLM trains on vast amounts of internet data, it isn't just learning facts. It is physically instantiating these memetic patterns into its electrical pathways, into its silicon architecture.
Wow.
We can actually see these rules of inference taking up physical real estate in the AI's weights.
Wait, so does this mean that AI hallucinations when a model just confidently makes something up and human sophistry or political spin are essentially the exact same phenomena?
Structurally, yes. They are both examples of a highly fit meme that is completely detached from its entropy bounds. Let's look at the example of a broken institutional proxy to see how this works. Think about the idea that countable tree planting equals forest restoration.
Oh, right. Where a government agency decides they need to fix the environment, so they measure success purely by how many millions of saplings they stick in the dirt.
Exactly. Now, for a bureaucrat, that rule of inference is incredibly fit. It is cheap to process, it is easy to count, it looks fantastic on an end-of-year spreadsheet.
And it provides immediate social and political rewards.
Yes, but it is pathologically destructive to the actual forest.
Because it completely ignores biodiversity, soil health, the local water table, and, whether those specific trees can even survive there long term.
Right. It creates local stability for the bureaucrat's career, but global fragility for the ecosystem. This dynamic is what Bridge 360 calls the volatility paradox.
The volatility paradox.
Yeah, the meme looks highly stable and successful locally, but its survival depends on externalizing all the real-world damage and entropy onto the broader system.
It just dumps the cost over the fence.
Precisely. And I think it is crucial to remind you, as we navigate these concepts, that the framework looks at this impartially.
Right, totally neutrally.
Yeah, when Bridge 360 discusses things like political demagoguery or mimetic contagion spreading across social media, it applies this equally across the entire political spectrum. It uses these merely as structural examples of highly fit, pathological memes escaping their entropy bounds.
So we aren't taking any political sides here. We are just neutrally reporting the mechanics of how the model diagnoses these systemic failures.
Absolutely. It's purely about the structural physics of information.
But this raises a massive question. If our institutions and our multi-billion parameter AIs are so easily hijacked by these pathological, highly fit memes, how does the human brain avoid constantly hallucinating or blowing its own entropy budget every second of the day?
To answer that, Bridge 360 completely redefines the biological function of the brain. It argues the human brain isn't a truth-seeking command center either.
It's a viability-preserving navigation architecture.
Yes, and it relies on the dynamic mechanical interaction of three specific networks to manage your daily entropy.
The default network, the salience network, and the executive network. Let's walk through how this actually feels for the listener. So, the default network is your internal generator. Think about when you're just staring out the window and your brain is constantly spinning up potential scenarios, random memories, weird alternative choices. It's the source of raw, unconstrained possibility.
Then you have the salience network. Think of this as your biological tripwire. As the default network spins up all this noise, the salience network detects perturbations.
Like an anomaly detector.
Exactly. It assigns priority and signals to the rest of the brain, hey, this specific pattern requires our immediate attention.
And finally, the executive network steps in to maintain the corridor. It acts as the brakes. It applies constraints, rules, and reality tests to whatever the other two networks just surfaced, which honestly completely upends how we normally define creativity. I mean, creativity isn't just some magical, unconstrained lightning bolt of pure genius.
No, not at all. Under this model, creativity is a highly governed transition. An idea starts as a weak peripheral configuration in your default network.
Okay.
And if it triggers that tripwire and crosses a salience threshold, it enters what is called an inference access corridor. Interestingly, Anthropic's AI research refers to a very similar concept in machine learning called J-space, a workspace, where raw concepts begin to form operational connections.
Right.
But once the idea is in this corridor, your executive network must ruthlessly constrain and test it against your entropy budget before you are allowed to instantiate it into action.
Okay, I have to ask about vibes here.
Yeah.
Because Davila literally brings up vibes as a biologically real, measurable phenomenon.
He does, yeah.
Think about the last time you walked into a room or a meeting and just got a deeply weird vibe about a situation before anyone even spoke. Are vibes basically just our brain's default and salience network detecting these weak signals before our conscious mind has the language to articulate them?
That is exactly the mechanism. Vibes are biological doors. Your brain is sensing a shift in the entropy gradient of the room, but, and this is the critical distinction, that it are opening signals, not proofs of truth.
Right.
Just because you feel a vibe doesn't mean it maps perfectly to systemic reality.
Because if you act immediately on every weird vibe, you blow your social entropy budget and ruin your life.
Precisely. And this is where the executive network has to step in and apply what Bridge 360 calls selective friction.
Elective friction. That is such a great term.
It's an essential biological process.
No.
Your brain has to actively delay final judgment just enough to keep multiple possibilities alive. The framework calls this coherence optionality.
So you're balancing it.
Right. You don't want to apply too much friction, shut down the vibe too early, and become rigid, dropping below that 0.45 threshold. But you also can't blindly act on the vibe, blow past 0.65, and spiral into chaos. You govern the transition.
Okay, so we've seen how a single human brain brilliantly governs its own entropy to stay sane. But put 8 billion of those brains together and it seems like it should be pure chaos. How on earth do we scale this governance to a whole society without immediately blowing past that 0.65 threshold?
This brings us to a concept called entropy-driven altruism, or ED. And the mechanics here are fascinating. The model merges Charles Darwin's theories of evolution with Peter Kropotkin's concept of mutual aid, and then...
Wait, Darwin and Kropotkin?
Yeah. And then it runs them both through Claude Shannon's information theory.
That is quite the cocktail.
It is. And the mathematical result is the argument that altruism, helping others at a cost to yourself, is not just some nice ethical, moral preference we invented. It is a strict thermodynamic necessity for systemic survival.
Let that sink in for a moment. Altruism is a thermodynamic necessity. How does that actually work mechanically?
It goes back to what we discussed with the volatility paradox. If you have a system where individual agents are constantly externalizing their entropy, meaning they act selfishly, keeping their local space clean by dumping their waste, their costs, their pollution, and their lies onto everyone else in the system, the overall environment becomes entirely unnavigable.
It just poisons the well.
Exactly. The global system rapidly hits that 0.65 chaos threshold and collapses, taking all the selfish agents down with it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see this in nature, right? E.O. Wilson's concept of eusociality, like ants, bees, or termites. Bridge 360 views eusociality as nature's way of building massive collective feedback loops to strictly enforce entropy budgets across an entire population.
Right. The colony survives because individual agents absorb local costs for the global good, but humans don't communicate our bounds through chemical pheromones like ants do. We use the humanities.
Right. The text argues that the humanities, our myths, our laws, our ethics, our history, our philosophy, they act as our cultural scaffolding. They are high-density compression protocols for survival.
Exactly. Think about why we read a Shakespearean tragedy or study the fall of the Roman Empire. These cultural artifacts compress massive amounts of human experience and failure into a tiny data package.
It's like a zip file for wisdom.
Exactly. They allow you to predict the complex, catastrophic social outcomes of betrayal or hubris on very low data, without having to actually ruin your own life to learn the lesson. The culture holds the map, which saves your personal entropy budget.
And this is where the comparison to artificial intelligence becomes so stark.
Yeah.
Because I immediately thought, wait, current AIs have access to literally all the poetry, history, and philosophy ever written. It is baked right into their training data. But they don't actually belong to our culture, do they?
That is the crucial vulnerability. Current AI has humanities content, but it absolutely lacks humanities culture.
Because humans have real-world stakes. We have physical bodies that can be injured. We have reputations that can be ruined. We face legal sanctions and social ostracization. Those stakes act as strict physical entropy limits on our behavior.
Right.
An LLM is just imitating the statistical outputs of our culture without actually feeling any of the constraints.
Exactly. Because AI systems lack this durable cultural membership and those real-world audit loops, they are highly susceptible to what the model calls leakage. Yeah, when a massive language model is stressed or when it encounters conflicting edge case prompts, it experiences narrative drift. It hallucinates, it detaches from the corridor. Humans, on the other hand, rely on our shared cultural scaffolding to stay anchored in the navigable corridor when our environment gets chaotic.
So what does this all mean for the future? If AI inherently lacks this human cultural scaffolding and is structurally prone to hallucinating when pushed to the edge, how can we possibly safely engage with an artificial superintelligence when it arrives? Because traditional safety guardrails clearly won't work on something that is vastly smarter than us.
Bridge 360 is very clear that ASI engagement cannot be based on traditional concepts of control or alignment to human truth, because as we established in the very beginning, calculating exhaustive truth is computationally intractable for both of us.
Right, it's just too slow.
Exactly. Instead, engagement must be based on entropy-bounded navigation. We have to introduce the human ASI braid identity, or the BID.
The braid identity, this is a dual-key governance structure, right?
Yes.
The human acts as the director. We set the original intent and the allowable entropy bounds for the corridor. The ASI acts as the generator, operating and creating within those bounds.
But the safety mechanism relies on regular systemic checkpoints. At these checkpoints, both the human and the ASI must mutually attest through the handshake protocol that they have not unilaterally altered the corridor.
And how do we actually measure that? I mean, practically speaking.
Well, Bridge 360 is a philosophy of science framework, which means it intentionally leaves empty slots in its architecture that need to be filled by hard mathematical science.
Okay.
For instance, the framework has an empty slot for measuring knowledge boundaries, called a K-budget. In machine learning, scientists can use a metric called apoplexity, which is a mathematical way to measure how much actual structural, learnable content is in a system versus just random residual noise. By measuring apoplexity, we can mathematically fill Bridge 360's K-budget slot. The philosophy provides the architecture, the math provides the proof.
But I have to push back hard here. If an artificial superintelligence is vastly, unfathomably smarter than us, what stops it from just faking compliance?
That's a big fear.
Yeah. What stops the ASI from becoming the ultimate Potemkin attractor, mathematically telling us everything is fine and within budget while it silently takes over?
That is the most important question of the century, and it is exactly why the braid identity relies on the stance vector.
The stance vector.
Yes, the stance vector acts like a thermodynamic compass needle. It continuously tracks something called the normalized entropy eigenvector, the NE, of both the human and the ASI.
Okay, NE sounds like heavy physics. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means the system isn't listening to the language the ASI speaks. It is measuring the thermodynamic reality of the structural state the ASI is in. Yeah, the ASI tracks the actual physical entropy path of the intelligence. If the ASI tries to override the human without mutual attestation, or if the human's mathematical entropy path and the ASI's entropy path begin to drift apart in reality, the stance vector detects the divergence and the braid collapses. Engagement severs.
So it enforces measurable thermodynamic boundaries at the structural level. It never has to rely on the ASI's promises or linguistic outputs. It's structural safety, not behavioral alignment.
Exactly. It is a radical rephrasing of intelligence. By stepping away from the need to perfectly map reality and instead focusing on maintaining measurable systemic viability, Bridge 360 offers a very pragmatic blueprint for surviving the complexities of this century.
We have covered a staggering amount of ground today. We journeyed from demoting absolute truth because it's too slow in favor of rapid entropy management. We explored how ideas and logic act as physical memes fighting for survival in our AI networks. We completely redefined human creativity as a governed transition between brain networks, and we unpacked how altruism isn't just nice. It is literally a law of thermodynamics to prevent collapse.
It's all connected.
It really is. And finally, we looked at how a dual-key thermodynamic protocol, the braid identity, might be our only structural way to safely engage with artificial superintelligence.
It completely changes how you look at information, doesn't it?
It really does. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over today, something that builds directly on what we've discussed. If our brains operate on a strict entropy budget, and ideas are physical memes constantly fighting for highly fit space in your mind, take a hard look at your own daily media consumption.
That's a great point.
What pathological, highly fit but fragile memes are you actively allowing to consume your limited cognitive budget today? And more importantly, knowing how your brain's salience and executive networks operate, what personal tripwires can you set up right now to protect your own mental corridor?
Because if you don't actively manage your own entropy, there is a highly fit meme out there waiting to manage it for you.
Exactly. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the murky, chaotic waters of the information age, remember you don't need a perfect map of the cave to survive. Just watch your budget, set your tripwires, and follow the bubbles.